welcome to our show. This is Crooked Doctors. Today is Friday, January 13th. It's Friday the 13th, 2012, and we're here with Mr. Alex Sanchez, who is Director of United We Stand. Thank you for coming today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me once again. I'm quite the honor to be here once again.
And Mr. Alex Sanchez lives in Washington Heights. I lived in Washington Heights, and we were discussing before the show some of the issues that united us. But before we get into that, I want to say thank you to Josh Valinsky. Thank you, Mr. Valinsky. Let me give him a little plug here. Hold it. Mr. Josh Valinsky. This is his official site of Mr. Josh Valinsky. Let me take this down a little bit and then I'll show you. Mr. Valinsky is an independent producer here at Manhattan Neighborhood Network. And this week we went down to the Innocence Project. The Innocence Project is in Lower Manhattan, and what they try to do is they try to get people who've been, well, mostly men actually, people who've been wrongly convicted out of jail. And what they do is they work on DNA evidence. So post-conviction, they will try to show that the system, the crooked system, because remember, we've got crooked doctors, crooked judges, crooked police. They try to show how this crooked system railroaded innocent people in jail. And
through DNA, right?
Yeah, and what they'll do is they'll work with major cases, so let's say murders or robberies, rapes. They'll use the DNA evidence. Now, this is really important to me because when I was studying biological sciences at Columbia University, I actually ran these DNA tests in research labs. Okay. So they'll use DNA evidence and they'll show that this man who was, let's say, I'm making up a hypothetical, but the Innocence Project will take cases from like the mid to late 1980s, and they'll show that all the evidence that was used to convict these people, eyewitness testimony, circumstantial evidence, is all flawed, that someone was wrongly convicted, and the DNA evidence, for example, will show that that person could have never committed this rape, and they'll let him go. So there are innocent, not one or two or three, but like hundreds of innocent, wrongly convicted people in jail, and the Innocence Project, operating here in Lower Manhattan, post-conviction will try to help these innocently convicted folks, men and women, get out of jail. Now, the Innocence Project was started at Yeshiva University's law school, Cardozo Law School. So here I am at Yeshiva University's medical school, where medical school students are being railroaded out of medical school. Their careers are being destroyed, while at the same time the law school is giving birth to the Innocence Project. Now, do you see a little contradiction?
It's like an oxymoron.
Yeah, you see a little contradiction here? So Mr. Josh Valinsky had me on his show, and we were discussing on his show, and I'm going to get a copy of that tape, how I was outlining for Mr. Valinsky how our civil rights as medical school students were horribly violated at Yeshiva University's medical school, which would be bad anywhere. But I came first in time, and other students are calling me, putting their cases on mine, and we organized ourselves up together into the Yeshiva Victims Group. We went and contacted Mr. Elie Wiesel, Nobel Peace Prize winner, Holocaust survivor. So we go to Mr. Wiesel, who sits on the board of trustees of my medical school, and we say, look, we didn't ask to be reinstated. We didn't ask to be vindicated. We asked for a simple, fair hearing. So, I mean, these are our civil rights here. This is a school built by Holocaust survivors, people who have had everything taken from them by force without the rule of law. Who would be more sensitive to this than Mr. Elie Wiesel, who, by the way, spit in our faces, figuratively. So it was very disappointing. So when I explained this to Mr. Valinsky, I said, Mr. Valinsky, I want a commitment from you today that you will come down to me to the Innocence Project and ask these people, how on the one hand can you recognize that the system is so flawed that you will railroad someone, and on the other hand, in your medical school, you're railroading your medical school students. And this is not unique to the medical school, because when I went to the State Attorney General's office, what we discovered was that there's never been a fair hearing for a student in the state of New York since the dawn of time. So these are thousands of students, you know, every single medical school. I was sent out to every single medical school to look at their hearing policies, and there's not one hearing policy that says a student gets to be in the room to hear the arguments against them before they're expelled from that. I mean, you have to be kidding me with this. This is why we went to Reverend Sharpton's organization, and this is happening in our neighborhood, in Washington Heights. This is the evil in our neighborhood. So Mr. Volinsky, interviewed me on his show, and I discussed with him the civil rights violations, and then I got a commitment from him. I said, I want you to come down to Yeshiva University's Innocence Project with me and ask these people about this. And he promised me that he would, but I wasn't sure that he would, but he did. So thank you, Mr. Volinsky, for being an honorable man. He's a man of his word. And he broadcasts here from Manhattan Neighborhood Network. He also does frequent radio specials at WBAI. And he also is a guest on Harold Chandler's show. This is Howard Chandler. Harold Chandler is a famous guy in our Manhattan Neighborhood Network. He's been doing public access TV for about 20 years. And he interviews people like Yasser Arafat, that kind of thing. This is Mr. Josh Volinsky. Not the best picture I could find, but thank you, Mr. Volinsky. And this is his good friend, Harold Chandler. And I wanted to thank Mr. Volinsky for coming to Yeshiva University's Innocence Project with me and asking them. I'm going to be following up with the Innocence Project and see what they have to say. So one of the things that, you know, there's a group of us. There's the Nassau County Civic Association. There's Patricia Waiters in Hoboken. There's me in Jersey City. There's the 911 first responders. What does all this have to do with us? How are we all united? And one of the ways that we're all united is, and I'm going to show the Nassau County Civic Association website here, is, and I want to say thank you to the Nassau County Civic Association. This is the Nassau County Civic Association website, and we're all united because if you look at their mission statement, what they're really all about is to try to promote open, moral, and honest government. And we don't agree on every issue, but we agree on many issues. I'm sure, Alex, that we all agree on the wise and efficient use of taxpayer dollars. And
definitely so.
We're looking to reduce government waste and fraud. We certainly want open, honest, and moral government that are responsive to the needs of the people. So thank you, Nassau County Civic Association. I wanted to give them a shout out. Do you want to say hello to John Field?
Hey, definitely. My mentor, John Field, like I mentioned last time, an officer and a gentleman, Army paratrooper who lost half a foot after 9/11. A steel beam came down on his foot while he was working on the pile at Ground Zero. And very diligent, the way our founding fathers had intended, a government of the people. He has taken a 9/11 community on his back, and as you can see in the pictures that you're showing now on the forefront, on behalf of a 9/11 Hinder community. John, I've been walking the halls of Congress alongside John since late 2003, early 2004, on behalf of the Sadroga Act, which today is a reality, a law of the land. But many wrongs still continue, and this is why you and I are so much embedded in this quest for justice and truth and liberty for all of us, the American way, because we are citizens, and what our founding fathers had intended was a government of the people, we the people. So this is what we have been doing. We have formed a coalition. I would rather call it a family, and we very much have put a package together, and we have organized, and we have managed to get a legislation that somewhat takes care of those affected by 9/11 contamination, which is the residents, firefighters, police officers, labor, iron workers, and people like myself who went there as cheap labor to perform cleanup.
Now, if you have a question, you can give us a call at 212-245-7273. That's 212-245-7273. And what,
let me give the number out in Spanish
okay,
also for the Spanish-speaking audience. Mi nombre es Alex Sánchez, soy invitado por la señora Radin a su programa, esta es mi segunda vez. Soy respondiente de los ataques del 11 de septiembre. Y estoy aquí para brindar aquella información para aquellas personas afligidas por la contaminación. Los números del estudio son 212-245-7273. Por favor, si tienen una pregunta, por favor llamar y se la vamos a contestar. Muchas gracias.
Terrific. And what the compelling issue that unites us today is, and I brought to Mr. Sanchez's attention, and I talked to some other 911 groups. I was living in Jersey City, and at Jersey City Medical Center, we have doctors who are crooked doctors. That's the point
of your show.
Yeah, the name of my show, Crooked Doctors. So when we formed a group in Jersey with, and I'll be showing some photographs of Patricia Waiters, and she's a mover and a shaker in Jersey City. When we formed a group, and some other people that formed a group, and we went down before the holidays to Governor Christie's office, one of the members of our group is a 911 first responder, and we were discussing this. There's no way that anyone in the 911, any leader, any advocacy group in the 911 community is going to send anybody down to Jersey City Medical Center where LIdya Radin is your test case, and I've already demonstrated that doctors will lie. Now, why is that important to the 911 community? Because as we had on this show, we had an expert witness, David Hunter, who confirmed for us that some of the poisons that you were exposed to at the 911 event can lead to birth defects in your children, your children's children, your grandchildren.
Definitely.
So this is a huge money suck.
We have studies that show today that women who were pregnant at the time and were exposed, when they had their newborn, they had very low birth weight. And we also have had these devastating cancers among
We'll get to the issue of cancer in just 1 second.
Okay.
So what we got is, and this is why I went to talk to the 911 community, is we got a hospital. We know these doctors will lie. Jersey City Medical Center is a teaching hospital for Mount Sinai. One of the doctors, the psychiatrist who lied about me, operates out of Mount Sinai. I'm not even sure this guy is street legal, to be honest with you, and I'll tell you because he's not registered on New York Doctor Profile. But the bottom line is the government has an interest in limiting the amount of money that it's going to provide. Because if you're looking at mutagens that are going to affect your children, Alex, and your children's children and grandchildren, this is a huge money suck. So wouldn't it be advantageous, have we seen this before, where you send you send an innocent person down to a medical center and a psychiatrist lies? Can we prove that? Yeah, we can prove it in my case. I can show you one example, very simple to understand. So when I talk to the 911 community, and when I talk to the police, and then when I talk to the firemen, and when I talk to, God, name any law enforcement group, the sheriffs, I'm like, my friends in the military, do you want to be sent down to a hospital where I've already proved that psychiatrists will lie? That's very frightening. And when I talk to the Nassau County Civic Association, they're like, yeah, this is a standard operating procedure. You'll have an honest cop. They'll try to tell the truth. And instead, you'll get a bunch of psychiatrists who will lie and try to take this cop off the streets by saying, oh, he has a drinking problem. He fights with his wife. They'll try to take his pension away from him. The person who taught me most of what I know was a lawyer who handled for the last 15 years case after case after case after case where honest cops are trying to come forward and they couldn't get a fair hearing. They were losing their careers and their pensions. They were being defamed. And so when I went to her and I started studying her cases, there's never been a medical school student who's had a fair hearing. We have the great white wall of silence. The police have the great blue wall of silence. But what's really frightening is if you have doctors who will lie, crooked doctors who will lie, it's very easy to discredit anyone. And it's very frightening for a military person to know or a police officer to know that all you have to do, or anyone in law enforcement or a 911 first responder to know, is that this hospital, it's a clear and present danger. You go down to that hospital, the doctors will lie.
Let me give you an example.
Go ahead.
As someone affected by 9/11 contamination, and as director of United We Stand and Latino liaison to the Feel Good Foundation, I get to speak with hundreds and thousands of men and women who have been affected by exposure. When you apply for workers' comp, you immediately have to go to the doctors of the insurance company. Every time we get a report, is these people are able to work, they're able to manage.
Right,
they don't
it's
need
downplayed, it's minimized.
Exactly, but that is so, this commonality, and it's so common in our system. But I like what you mentioned, a good cop trying to do his job. We have the very worst, but we also have the very best. It goes in politics also, and I have discussed this with Carol Maloney, who is co-sponsor of the Sadroga Act. When you have leadership that's very much out there doing the good fight, like the Civic, Nassau Civic County, and all you guys united, we cannot take a backseat, and we will not take a backseat because, as I mentioned, and I keep saying it again, it's a government of we the people.
Right, and so let me give one example of I mean, in my case, I tried to pick out the most obvious, the most easy to understand examples. And then I want to talk about why we went down to Governor Christie's office. And again, you guys have to have a voice. There is no way that you're going to send anyone to Jersey City Medical Center. I mean, I was talking at there was a meeting last night at the Hudson County Freeholders, and I was talking to people who had property that they wanted to sell. I'm like, how can you, when we go to real estate developers like Donald Trump invested hundreds, millions of dollars building these nice buildings. Do you want to come live in Jersey City? You know how lucky that I am that when I went down to Jersey City Medical Center, my brother got on a plane, flew out from California, said, "What are you doing to my sister? Leave her alone." If we were a wealthy family, and this is who Donald Trump is trying to sell real estate to. If we were a wealthy family and my brother wanted to cheat me out of my inheritance, he would have said, "She's crazy as a loon, leave her there," and he would have stolen my inheritance from me. Thank God we're poor. But Donald Trump is trying to sell to. I'm talking to the mayor of Jersey City, Mayor Healy. I'm like, Mayor Healy, do you think rich ladies will want to come live in Jersey City when they know that all you have to do is go bribe a doctor at Jersey City Medical Center and their family will lock them up and steal the family money? This is how the patients' rights movement was started in the 1920s. Normal, decent, sane women who happened to have some money married scoundrels who would bribe psychiatrists to put them in locked psychiatric wards for life. It's horrible. So one example here, so there's no way that you are going to send anyone down to Jersey City Medical Center without coming to, where our cases were referred to the Public Corruptions Bureau in Trenton, and I'll be following up with them.
We have been very fortunate. I myself sit at the advisory board at Mount Sinai Center of Excellence for World Trade Center maladies, and we have been very fortunate because this program has very much saved our lives, and the leadership involved, as I mentioned, the New York Congressional Delegation team from A to C. And I want to retract something that I said on the show.
Well, you want to make a correction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I committed the mistake of saying there was a Republican senator in New Jersey. That was not the case. So I want to apologize to the distinguished gentleman, Senator Lautenberg.
United States Senator Lautenberg. He's a Democrat.
Exactly.
He's my senator in Jersey. Senator Lautenberg is the United States Senator in Jersey. I think you confused him with Peter King.
One of my idols, Menendez, who I think is brilliant, and he's doing a phenomenal job as a senator. I confused him because on December 9th of 2010. You're
allowed to make a mistake. You're a human being. So
hey,
it's okay.
but we're here providing the proper information,
right.
So we need to correct ourselves.
So
December 9th, 2010. We had 57 votes in the Senate. The death of Senator Byrd and Senator Kennedy made it impossible for us to achieve a 10.7, get this 10.7 bill across. So
and this was the bill that was going to help.
This was the Sadroga Act. Mm-hmm. It failed that day. We came back 2 weeks. It was under a lame duck session, and Senator Gillibrand magnificently worked out a deal with the Republican Party. And let me also mention first, every society honors and reveres those who go to the front line. We have had a Republican establishment turn their backs on 9/11 responders, and that is not American, and that is not patriotic whatsoever. So my mistake was confusing Representative Pete King, who's also a sponsor of the Sadroga ad, with the Senator of Jersey. So I very much apologize for that.
So what you want to do is make clear is that Senator Lautenberg is our United States Senator in New Jersey with Senator Menendez. And in New York, we have Congressman Pete King,
who was the only Republican supporting our bill.
So what we've got is Senator Menendez and Senator Lautenberg, who are Democrats in Jersey. They did not support? They
did support our bill. It was unanimous throughout the Democratic Party in the Senate, thanks to the leadership of Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi in the House. But the lack of those 3 votes, very much they had to work out a deal, because what Republicans were claiming is how we were going to pay for this bill. This is the same party that brought us to Afghanistan and Iraq and did a Medicare bill on the credit. So very much don't understand where the policies come from.
Well, what we're going to do, I don't know if we'll have time during this show, but what we're going to do is when you talk about, you don't talk about lobbying for what you want. You talk about educating.
Educating, because we're not a special interest group.
Right. So along the lines of educating, I'd like the opportunity to educate you a little bit.
Hey, why not?
And the reason why the reason why I gave you the policy paper, the Israeli lobby and U.S. foreign policy.
I'm so happy you mentioned that.
Was because I wanted you to read it, and we have some disagreements about the state of Israel, which we don't have to go into now. Now, for example, I talked to Rabbi Marcus. Rabbi Marcus was second in command of Torah College. He's a Zionist. We disagreed about Israel, but we put those issues aside because we had other things to talk about. And one of the things that we talked about was the fact that a graduate of Torah College, Mike Tyberg, went to my medical school. He's an Orthodox Jewish man, and he was also a victim of federal student loan fraud by Yeshiva University. And he asked me to help him because I demonstrated that I'm a victim of federal student loan fraud, and Mike Tyberg, who came after me, is also a victim of federal student loan fraud. So the two of us sat down with Rabbi Marcus, who was second in command at Torah College. This is an Orthodox Jewish school, and even though Rabbi Marcus is a Zionist and he supports Israel, I'm not, and I don't. But we didn't have a fight about that because what we were talking
about. Like myself, I am pro-Israel.
Well, before you say that, though, what I'd like you to do is read the Israeli lobby.
I was meaning to tell you, I did read the Israeli lobbies, and I very much agree. I don't know.
So what we can do is say we'll have another discussion about that. Because we got other things here. But you wanted to correct on the record. You wanted to thank Peter King, the Republican congressman who supported
for his leadership. I mean, it's really sad that he only got 12 Republicans in the House side to approve of this bill, but still, he knew for a fact. New York City has become a test tube for when it comes to catastrophes and exposure catastrophes, and this is why I go back to Confucius. If you do not correct your mistakes the first time around, the second time around there will be far greater consequences. This is why we educate.
Exactly, and I think when I asked some of my friends, I think the stance of the Republican Party was not, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, was not that they didn't support taking care of the 911 first responders, but they didn't support the extent of the money. So I think they wanted to limit the amount of funds.
It's clear as crystal. You hit it right on the dot. But at the same time, this is the same party that very much embarks into wars overseas.
And we'll get into good now.
And nation build when we have our own suffering here.
The only nation we're interested in building is America. Okay, America, and we need America to be strong and free. And here's why. and I hate to say this because it sounds a little arrogant to other countries, so I sort of want to apologize in advance, but you need a country like America. You need a country that's unique.
Definitely.
Because if you are oppressed in other countries, this is my mother's life story, if you are oppressed in other countries and denied opportunity, you know that you can come to America and get a second chance.
Well, my life story is I am the son of immigrants who came from the Dominican Republic, and people who come to America, the land of the immigrants, by the way, people who come to America, they're looking for a better life so they can educate their children and very much at least have a shot at the American dream, be a middle class. This is a very important election coming up in 2012 and 2013. We're going to have to choose. We're going to choose a president who is very much for education, jobs, and innovation, or we are going to choose a party that wants to cut, and very much have the very rich not pay any tax.
Well, I disagree with some of what you said, but we have things that we can't agree on.
This is the beauty of our country, where two citizens can sit at a table and very much have a debate. And you love this country as much as I do, and that should be our main priority right now.
That's really true. And I think what sometimes I hear Americans criticized in the international community is, you know, we're the ragamuffins, we didn't fit in the aristocratic, you know, other countries. And I'm like, no, America is the risk takers, the entrepreneurs, the people who come here literally with the clothes on their backs and $5 in their pocket, and they make something out of nothing. Okay, so they really do. I mean, this country was built on people who are willing to go to the think about what it takes for someone like an immigrant to come to this country. You have no connections, you have no money, you don't speak the language.
Well, one of the things that is very much devastating my community, which is the Latino community, and I urge those Latinos who have a chance, is learn the language. If you come to the United States, try to speak English, because it's going to be a much easier place to live in if you can relate and understand the language.
And encourage Americans like me to learn to speak Spanish.
Also, yes,
estoy estudiando español.
My son is learning Mandarin. I hope that's not going to burn me in the long run.
No, that's good too. Because the other thing that's really good is that Americans demonstrate sometimes their arrogance by not learning other languages. So not only should immigrants try to learn English, but you should also teach us your language. So there's a very kind woman who's teaching me Spanish. Estoy estudiando español hoy.
Yes, muy bueno tu español. Let me also mention something else. I don't believe in revolution. I believe in evolution. And our country has evolved. We are a very young country, 200 and plus years old. And we went from slavery to very much oppressing women, and we have moved forward. Even in the matter of race, as a Latino, one of the things that moved me the most at Ground Zero was how everyone came from all different walks of life, all different social classes blend together, and we look. I get goosebumps when I talk about this. And we came together and we did the unspeakable in a record time, period of time, 7 months. And you went to Ground Zero, and it seemed like nothing had happened there, but we were missing 2 buildings. When I went past those barricades, I looked into the citizens' eyes, and I knew what was expected of me. And as a citizen, I think we should all take full responsibility of what is expected of us.
I agree. And one of the things that I think, you know, when I talk to the 9/11 groups, when I go to Jersey City, when I say we can't have crooked doctors, crooked judges, crooked police, it's because basically we all want the same thing. We want a fair shot in life.
Exactly.
So what I want to do is say thank you to Congressman Crowley and point out one really easy to understand litigation point. And then we'll talk a little bit about why we're going to the Public Corruptions Bureau in Trenton and why you need to be with us, and some of that. Here, I was wrongly convicted and spent 11 months in Rikers. One of the things that Yeshiva University did, now you live in Washington Heights. You live in Washington Heights, about in the Upper West Side. Yeshiva University is right here. I lived in Washington Heights. Yeshiva University are the criminals in our neighborhood. In 2010, and I talked to the premier law enforcement agency in America about this yesterday. In 2010, the purpose of my criminal trial, my illegal conviction and incarceration, was to make a false record. And one of the things that they said, and I want to give the viewing audience a really easy to understand example. One of the things that they said in 2010 was that there was no state agency involved. I was bringing out federal student loan fraud at Yeshiva University. You can walk to Yeshiva University from where you live. I was living on West 185th Street. I could walk to, West 188th Street.
I lived on 188th Street for Wadsworth for like about 3 years, so it's like from walking distance to Yeshiva.
Yeah, Yeshiva University was a few blocks from West 188th Street in Broadway where I was living. I had discovered that Yeshiva University falsified my educational records, my financial records, my medical records, and I was bringing out the details of federal student loan fraud. And one of the things that they did in 2010, the university paid its attorneys to lie. This is very scary, because you go home and it's Detective Cologne, the 34th precinct, the 33rd precinct are your police precincts.
Yes.
Detective Cologne at the 34th precinct lied to put me in.
I have a lot of good friends in the 33rd and 34th precinct who are 9/11 responders also.
And one of those who is not a friend is Detective Cologne. Okay, the man lied on the witness stand, and one of the reasons why we had the farce of a criminal trial in 2010, they claimed there was no state agency involved in this federal student loan fraud. So when you take out a loan to pay for your education, there's a state agency that I paid 1 to 3% of the money that I borrowed. I paid to the state agency to make sure that this state agency monitored what was going on so that I wouldn't be ripped off as a student. And the school claimed in 2010, here's the really easy to understand example. The school claimed in 2010 that there was no state agency. Well, 5 years previously, me and a group of students went to Congressman Crowley's office where he's writing a letter of introduction for me and an Orthodox Jewish woman who asked me for help. He's writing a letter of introduction for us to the state agency. Now, Alex, I want you to take, and by the way, thank you, Congressman Crowley. I want you to take a look at this, okay? I gave this is in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Okay, this is this is not hard to understand. This is the docket number. This is with the exhibit. And do you see this right here where this is Congressman Crowley? And he's writing to who? This is the state agency, okay? The New York State Higher Education Services Corporation. Do you see this? Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is Congressman Crowley. Let me bring this down a little. Okay, this is Joseph Crowley right here. This has been in court. Look at the date on this. This is 2005, right? I just want to get you an overview.
For 7 years now.
This is at the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Okay, I got this letter. Let me increase the magnification so you can see it. I mean, I couldn't make it more obvious, right? This is October of 2005. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, this is October 2005. This is Congressman Crowley is writing this. This is coming from Joseph Crowley in Queens. There was an Orthodox Jewish woman who was also wrongly expelled. We had gone to Congressman Crowley, and he's writing this to Mr. James Ross at the New York State Higher Education Services Corporation. This is the state guarantee agency that monitors student loans. I'm bringing out crime and corruption in my school. They're in Albany. This is the medical school. These are the crooked doctors who will lie about you. And he's saying, I'm writing at the request of LIdya Radin. I mean, this is not, this is a woman named Marlene Abramova who asked me for help. Boy, that was the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. Regarding access to their complete educational records from Yeshiva University, okay? So this is happening in 2005. Right? I'm getting a letter of introduction to the Higher Education Services Corporation. And where is this piece of evidence? This is Joseph Crowley. This piece of evidence, I got this letter introducing me to the Higher Education Services Corporation in 2005. In 2006, we had a meeting in Albany. In 2007, I entered this as a piece of evidence in my court case. So this is the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. This is the federal courts. Lucky for me that the criminal courts are the state courts, so when I do my appeal, my attorney is going to refer to this, because he's referring to, he can cite to any public record. So lucky for me that I ceded the Second Circuit Court of Appeals with the evidence that exonerates me. Otherwise, I'd be doing more jail time right now. Now, is this hard to understand?
Not hard whatsoever. It's a very clear picture of what you have portrayed here today. But let me also mention James Zadroga Jr., whose name bears the bill, the Zadroga Act, very much had a medical examiner lied on his medical condition.
And
not once but twice. And the city of New York has yet to recognize firefighters and police officers who have fallen, our fallen heroes. As an advocate and as a political activist, I have very much have established a relationship with the orphans, the widows, the mothers, the fathers, like James Zadroga Sr. Also,
now let's slow down just a little and explain to our audience, so you want to explain to them in Spanish. I'm going to 911 first responders. I'm talking about crooked doctors. I'm talking about the danger when doctors lie. In Jersey, when I was working for a major pharmaceutical company and watched medical records get falsified, here I'm talking about financial records, you know, when doctors lie, people die. I can show this. This is why we have commonality.
Families are ruined. Let me also...
Absolutely. So when I went to 911 first responders and I was talking about crooked doctors, they're like, we know. James Zadroga knows. So there was a gentleman, a first responder, you know this better and you probably want to... James Zadroga, there were crooked doctors who lied about him, and it was people like John Field and you that went to Congress to pass the Zadroga bill to get compensation. He was discredited.
He was discredited, but at the same time, his father, who was also
an
officer and a gentleman, has to raise his, at the time now, 10-year-old granddaughter due to 9/11 contamination. So this is where our system is corrupt. There's no doubt about that. We need reform from A to C when it comes to the judicial, when it comes to the legislative process, from top to bottom. But we also need citizens like ourselves to go out there and do, I like the word you mentioned, the good fight. This is what it's all about.
So when I went to one of the reasons I found this very compelling was when I was working in Jersey, and I'm going to give a shout out to here we go. This is the office of our governor. This is Mr. Christie, Governor Christie, and what he says. This is his website. We went to Governor Christie's office. Me, Patricia Waiters. If we have time, I'll show you her photograph. And what he says, and I like the way he put it on his website, is that it really doesn't matter. It's not about party affiliation.
It's not about labels.
It's not about labels. It's about public corruption. And one of the reasons we went and asked for help was I worked when after my illegal expulsion from medical school, I moved to Jersey. I worked for a company, a pharmaceutical company, where decent, honest doctors were, usually this pharmaceutical company will do clinical research. They'll try to demonstrate that their drug is safe and effective. Yes. Doctors will report in.
Trying to get it approved through the FDA, right?
Right. Doctors will, so doctors are, there's a pharmaceutical company, they want to market a drug. They're doing studies.
Very powerful lobbyists, these people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a sense of they control our economy and they're controlling our government. These very powerful lobbyists who are controlling D.C. right this minute.
And when I'm working for this pharmaceutical company, normal, decent doctors are trying to report in, and they're being told, you know, change the legal team that wants to manage the medical record a certain way so they can get FDA approval is saying, take this word out, change this word. And I'm watching this cross my deck. The reason why I can talk about this is because the New York Times wrote a big article in their magazine section about, you know, what was going on with this company. The company Mr. Christie prosecuted, 18 people were dead because this was a pharmaceutical company that put no active drug in their inhalers. Exactly. So there's, poor people are working 2 jobs to buy these inhalers. They're watching their children suck on these inhalers, turn blue, and die. So when we went to Governor Christie's office, I'm like, I have to explain it to this former federal prosecutor.
Exactly. He's been there. He's been there on the front line, and he continues to be there. Governor Christie.
That's why you have to come when we go to the Public Corruptions Bureau and say, in Jersey City.
I will be there representing those 9/11 responders like James Zadroga Jr., whose doctor discredited them. There's no doubt about that.
Let me ask you something really quick about James Zadroga. There were some crooked doctors that wanted to discredit him, but you got your own experts and demonstrated that he was telling the truth, yes?
And also, we had 2 medical examiners from the city. One of them was very much imposing or carrying out orders from above, and then we had another medical examiner who very much took her job seriously as a citizen of our country and said, no, this man, his lungs shows contamination due to 9/11 exposure.
So you had James.
It's like a whistleblower. Also, the EPA. Let me mention also, for 2005, we were on the front line for the proper cleanup of Lower Manhattan with the community, and EPA under a Bush administration and a Republicans also who want to abolish this agency. This is an agency that protects the air and the water that we drink. We cannot get rid of such an important agency like the EPA. Well, basically, the runaround, once again, nothing was done. The evidence is there, as you mentioned. We have to go to Governor Christie with the evidence. Having a prosecutor on your side and a governor at the same time is quite the advantage.
Yeah. So this is Mr. Christie. People who don't know, this is our governor in Jersey. And we went to Mr. Christie. There's no one who would understand better than a former federal prosecutor.
Yes.
What it's like. He was up against a pharmaceutical company that would, when he prosecuted Shearing Plow, he was up against a pharmaceutical company that would spend $1 billion in litigation, pull every dirty trick. And if
they spend $1 billion in litigation, you can only imagine what they were spending in lobbying in D.C.
It's unconscionable, and it's a testimony to the really good work that the Feel Good Foundation does. But what unites all of us is we got crooked doctors, crooked judges, crooked police, crooked law enforcement, and we've had it. And that we're done with that now. We've got to do something, so we're pulling together because we want to take our country back.
We need citizens like ourselves to. One of the reasons I chose United We Stand was because it makes so much sense. United We Stand. We can do so much better when we are united. If we are a nation that are falling into these political tricks from
we're played off against each other.
Exactly. Yeah. Class warfare is the latest one I am hearing on the airwaves, but at the same time we're fed up. I mentioned something the first time I was here. We have a government that waits a couple of hours before a deadline before something gets done. That is not the government we want, and that is not the government we deserve. This is why I'm urging every citizen out there to go out and vote 2012, because we need to send a message. We need, as I mentioned earlier, we need to choose whether we're going to have someone who's going to push for education, is going to push for the lower class, and also going to push for innovation, or we're going to vote for a party that very much wants to cut and balance the budget on the backs of the very poor.
So what we're looking at now is, do you want to say this in Spanish so that the...
Mi contacto, estamos mirando en pantalla ahora, mi nombre es Alex Sanchez, una vez más, director de Unido Estamos. Mi número telefónico es 646-797-6378 y el correo electrónico es a.sanchez911response@gmail.com.
And of course, it's a very important election that's coming up for the next president, not least of which is I got four federal judges who have to be removed from the bench, not impeached. They lied to steal money. And, the second, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the Second Circuit, one of the things I learned was the Second Circuit Court of Appeals is the Second Circuit, is the place that sends the most judges to the Supreme Court. So if you've got 4 federal judges that have to be replaced now, there's no question that these judges have to go. And I'm sure Judge Patterson really hates my guts at this point. But, you know, I mean, if you're looking at there's no state agency involved, and I'm showing you what, they're going to take my letter out. One of the things they did to discredit me was to take my, remove my letters of recommendation from Senator Moynihan's office, and I worked for Senator Moynihan. But I mean, when it's this blatantly obvious, I mean, so if we're going to an election where you've got to pick 4 new federal judges, these are federal judges are not removed from the bench unless they do something very serious.
Yes.
So basically, they're there for life. They will influence.
It's a lifetime appointment. Right.
As long as you breathe, you're a federal judge. They will influence how we live for decades.
Policies. One of the things that was brought up by my President Barack Obama is we cannot legislate from the bench. And this was at a State of the Union address a couple of years back. And I agree with the Alito. I agree with the Alito and the Roberts Court, where corporations are people too. But once we start treating people like we treat corporations, then that's a whole different ballgame. Let me say in Spanish.
Go ahead.
Let me say in Spanish why am I here and why you and I are so connected.
Okay.
Para la audiencia latina, el programa de la señora Radin son doctores que mienten, y una de las causas que yo estoy aquí hoy es llevando o explicar la causa porque James Droga Jr., quien el nombre representa la ley Sadroga, que ampara a aquellas personas que fueron en contacto directo con la contaminación y hoy en día están enfermos. Hubieron médicos legistas de la ciudad que mintieron sobre su condición y decían que esta persona no estaba enferma por el alto nivel de toxina que fue expuesto en la zona cero. Todos sabemos la realidad, el aire estaba contaminado. Hoy en día el padre de James Droga Jr., James Droga Sr., está criando a su nieta de 10 años por causa de la contaminación del 11 de septiembre.
So basically, I think what we're trying to achieve here is that we're all united.
United we stand, once again.
We're all united on some like very basic things, like it's outrageous that, I mean, I got an entire medical school that's lying. I mean, I've got, I want to bring up Mr. Christie's picture again. We went to Governor Christie. I mean, I have a medical school that's lying, doctors who are lying. I've been persecuted.
I am very sympathetic with Governor Christie because his party very much wanted him to run for a presidential campaign, and in my view, he would have won downslide. It would have been he would have been the nominee for the Republican Party. And it took a whole lot of guts on his behalf and political savvy to go up there and say, I am not ready for this job yet.
You know, it's so funny that you'd say that, because when we went to his office, we were like, we need Mr. Christie. Thank God he's here. He can run for president later, but we need him right now. And as I was talking to his staff, they thought we were hostile, and we're like, we're not hostile. We need Mr. Christie. He should be very flattered that the people are clamoring for
when
him.
you speak the truth. Every time you're out there and you have the truth in a package, there's a good possibility you'll be co-hostile.
And so, you know, what we're trying to say is he should be very flattered that the people are clamoring for him, and we agree with what he says on his website. It's not about labels. It's not about party affiliation. It's we're fighting public corruption that has destroyed the lives of innocent people, and he knows from personal experience with crooked doctors at Shearing Plow that when doctors lie, people die.
I don't like to use this line, but I'm going to use it now. Okay. Country first, because it reminds me of Senator McCain, and we have a history, 9/11 responders and the senator. But country first, we need to very much embark on this journey that if we are a better country, we'll be better citizens. There's no doubt about that.
Right, and I don't like to say this because I don't want to alienate, you know, my contacts in the international community, but we really need a country like America needs to be strong and free. We stand unique among other countries, and we tend to keep the other countries in line because other countries know if you oppress your people too much, they can escape to America.
I'm so happy you mentioned that.
Like go ahead.
Time and time again, Herbert Hoover fed millions of Russians. Franklin D. Roosevelt unite with the European...
The former political prisoners of Cuba. I want you to come and meet them. They happen to be in Jersey City, the former political prisoners of Cuba. I'm listening to them talk in a freeholders meeting. This is where I was last night, sending you emails at like 3 in the morning. I'm at a freeholders meeting, and they're honoring the former political prisoners of Cuba, and they're talking about the tactics that were used against them. I'm like, excuse me, those are the tactics that are being used against me.
And those were the tactics they used against your mother in a communist country.
Yeah. You know, and it's the reason why she came here.
We are a great country, and history has proved that time and time again. As I mentioned, Herbert Hoover feeds millions of Russians while he is in office. Franklin D. Roosevelt creates social programs that are vital to American society today, and at the same time unite with the European League to defeat Adolf Hitler. And we have Ronald Reagan, a Republican.
Take down this war.
And
take down this
very
wall.
much give amnesty.
Take down this wall. When he's go ahead, I'm sorry.
And give amnesty to undocumented. If you speak to any Republican these days on immigration reform, it's like you're not going to get nowhere. And I mentioned in your program why, because unless you have political lobbyists backing any legislation in D.C., it will get nowhere. And I urge a Latino community to come together, those in power, those who are financially well set in the Latino community, so we can have reform, and the many people who are being separated from their children, their husbands, their wives, these people should have some access to citizenship to the United States.
So you should do a series of, if you want to talk about immigration reform.
Definitely. I think it's a must, because this is why it's so important. 2012 and this presidential election, we as a Latino, I am holding my President Barack Obama accountable on immigration reform.
So how do you react? I know we've discussed this before, but how do you react? In my case, I had an Israeli, I'm sorry that, you had an Israeli confess to immigration fraud on the witness stand in front of 2 judges, and the guy is just enjoying the benefits of living in America. They're not harassing his family, his friend. You know what really burns me? This guy is openly gay. So in Israel, he's not welcome, because the religious community oppresses gay men and women in Israel.
That is very wrong.
So he comes to America, where in America we provide him with education, a place to live openly, so he can realize his full potential. And what does he do? He lies to Homeland Security and immigration. Have you ever traveled in Israel?
No, I suffer from the Woody Allen syndrome. Anything outside of New York City, I start shaking.
In Israel, if you were to lie, if I went to Israel and I lied to their security, chances are I'd not make it out of the country alive. Wow. Okay, I would be crucified. This guy is ex-military. He claims supervisory status and combat status. So it's not like he can say, well, I'm an ignorant Israel. Yeah, I mean, I'm an ignorant, I'm sorry, let me correct myself. An ignorant a civilian. He's ex-military. Mm-hmm. So he knows.
It's mandatory in Israel, right?
Yeah, right. Okay. You get recruited into military service when you're 18. That's why they're so socialized to this combat mentality. But it's not like he can say, I'm an ignorant civilian, I didn't know. You know. You're ex-military. And it's not just ex-military. He claims on his resume supervisory experience. He claims he was giving healthcare lectures. He claims that he has combat experience. So you have a level that it would be expected that you would never lie to Homeland Security. And he's lying like post 9/11, which is even worse, right? So this guy lies to Homeland Security, lies to immigration, admits that he's perpetrated an immigration fraud with other Israelis and an attorney. And he's doing this on the witness stand in front of 2 judges. Let's name them. Judge Nino Falcone from North Bergen, Municipal Court Judge Nino Falcone from North Bergen, and Judge Fast. And what happens? Nothing. Now you tell me, Mr. Alex Sanchez, if that was a Spanish person, if that was from the Latino community, and they were and that person was
you've been to my gatherings and you see me at work and you've seen the look of disdain with many the responders, Mr. Checo and I, my assistant director, we look after. Many of them are undocumented. These people are very much in the shadows, and they're scared,
they live in fear.
They live in fear. So you can only imagine if one of these person goes to the stand, what's going to happen. I mean, it does not
they
take
would
a
be crucified.
Genius, what's going to happen. Let me also mention
That's
something
wrong.
that happened. I was at a hearing yesterday with Judge Hellerstein, who overlooks 9/11 cases. I opted not to go to the Sudroga funds because there's not enough compensation there. And one of the provisions put in place by the Republican Party was we get $2.8 billion. They're going to spread around $800 million the first 5 years, and the remaining $2 billion who will be sitting in a bank earning interest while men and women who have been exposed are sick or dying. So I opted to continue my lawsuit against building owners. Thank God we have such a fair
and
judge.
you're up against the federal government. So
yes,
this is
but at the same
task.
time, and I consider myself very fortunate. I'm also an optimist. We are in the hands of Judge Hellerstein. I mean,
so
couldn't get any much fairer than this judge.
Okay, that's good. But when we talk about judges who legislate from the bench, which my God, I've experienced, my 4 judges wholesale repealed the federal law that said I, as a student, can access and correct my records. So I know what crooked judges can do. It's not their job to like wipe away laws. It's good that you have a good judge, and I'll tell you something.
We have the best of the best. Well, let me tell you what the conversation was yesterday between Judge Hellerstein and those building owners who I am suing. I worked in 10 buildings in the period of 6 months at Ground Zero, and they were claiming most of the debris got into these buildings due to a terrorist attack. But Judge Hellerstein made it very clear yesterday, and I am very fortunate for that, that nevertheless, the fact that how the cleanup was performed after that, because I never been trained in asbestos cleaning. I never received any, I don't have any license to perform the work that I did. So there's negligence all over the place here. So we need fair judges. There are the good ones and there are the bad ones. Like everything in society and everything in life, you have the very best and you have the very worst.
Well, yeah, and what we've got like less than 2 minutes left. So what we want to do.
I would like to give a shout out to John Field and his WW.
I'm going to show his website, but I think you got to start talking to people about there are compelling issues, and I'd like to have Mr. Field come down and start talking, because right now is a critical time, I understand, for 911 first responders.
Yes,
They're making some very critical
we are
decisions.
very much approaching a time where Special Master Sheila Birnbaum will going to assess the cases for those who have opted to go to the Sudroga funds. So at the end of January, the Feel Good Foundation, I don't know, I don't have an exact date yet, but when I do, I will either phone in to your program or I will come in personally and give this information, because this is why we have been successful in the sense of advocacy, because we have been together and we have been a family and we all communicate to one another.
Now listen, if someone wants to donate a little money, they could donate a little money to
all they have to do is go to www.feelgood Foundation. And you look into donations, and
okay, so
this will serve very well. Let me tell you about what John Field does. John Field goes to a responder's house who's yet 10 years down the road has yet to establish his workers' comp or his disability claims, and he will come in with groceries, he will come in with toys, with clothing. This is a gentleman that has very much molded into me what he learned in the military is, in the United States Army, you do not leave yours behind, because it's unpatriotic and it's un-American, and we have no tolerance for that.
So what I'm displaying now is the contact information for the Feel Good Foundation, and there are 911 first responders who you are saying are still fighting for their disability, are still fighting for their
10 years down the road, ma'am.
Their workman's comp, and if you want to donate, You know, I say this to people, look, you'll throw away $2 on a cup of coffee. Could you throw away $2 to the Feel Good Foundation so that they can help a first responder who's still engaged in a legal battle to get just compensation?
And this will help the very best our country has to offer. Those men and women who rush down to ground zero, believe me, I was among them, and I am still among them today. And I never seen such courage, such tenacity, and to drive and strive for justice.
Okay, so we're looking at, we just looked at the Feel Good Foundation website, and I asked Mr. Field if he would support other people who needed help, and he just doesn't help 911 first responders. I asked him if he would help me, and he said yes.
He goes all across the board. As I mentioned the first time I was on your show, when his birthday comes up now, and this should be a surprise, but it's not going to be a surprise. We're
Yeah, we're out.
Okay.